When you hear the phrase soft as steel, what do you think of? While the word steel might conjure up images such as massive high-rise buildings, where does the soft part come in? And what exactly does this mean in our work and in our lives? Welcome to the Soft as Steel podcast with your host, Dennis Duran, featuring engaging conversations with a wide range of industry leaders around soft skills, how we practice love, inclusion, social justice, and compassionate leadership that's everlasting in the workplace. And now, here's Dennis Duran.
My guest for this episode of the Soft as Steel podcast is Chris Bagatelis. Chris is a founder and the current CEO of Bagatelis Architectural Glass Systems, BAGS, one of California's premier glazing subcontractors, established in February of 1999 in Sacramento, California. Chris is a 33-year glazing industry veteran. He's a highly regarded leader among union glazing contractors and manufacturers, serving as president of the Northern California Glass Management Association and co-chair of the North American Glass Management Association. Chris also serves his fellow union glazing contractors as co-chair of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 16 Pension Trust, and as a long-standing management trustee of the Painters and Allied Trades Management Labor Trust. This may seem a little convoluted, but I have been known by name and hopefully have a generally good reputation to Chris for over 10 years as a provider of training programs and speaking at events involving management and labor. Most recently, I hosted a special edition of this Soft as Steel podcast where I formally met Chris in person for the first time, preceded only by a phone conversation in preparation for the podcast recorded in front of the full audience of an important event known as the Finishing Industries Forum. Chris's contributions to the conversation were insightful, so I very much wanted to talk with him further. And here we are. Chris, welcome again to the Soft as Steel podcast.
Dennis, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk.
Good. We'll start talking.
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, my kind of history in the glass world, I've been around this business for my whole life. My father actually was a glazer, and I was around sweeping the shop as a kid. I worked as a glazer in high school and college, and after college, I got into business with my dad and my brother, and we started a business, and I've been doing this for the last 35 years. So this is my life, and I consider myself a glass guy.
Yeah. So as a glass guy, let's jump to the thing that I think is on everybody's mind, particularly leaders like yourself, pretty much all the time. And that is, as a question, what about our people? What about our people?
Well, it's kind of cliche to say, people are the most important thing, but people are the most important thing. And to me, we try to set a culture of having people, who are good people. And we think character matters. And we think engaging with people who want to be part of that culture, who think similarly to us, and want to do the right thing and want to do good and want to build great things is what we're all about. So to me, people, it's all about people. Everything in business is people, and our operation doesn't operate from all the way through the operation. We bring young men in to our operation who start, in a factory setting where we manufacture curtain wall units, and we have them go, some do their whole career all the way through the factory, and some actually decide they want to become an apprentice and become glazers and go out to the field and install this thing. But there's so many different people in our operation and different skill sets and, different education backgrounds. And to get them all to come together and create with a similar culture and a similar mindset is what's exciting to me, honestly.
Yeah. If you were to think about it for a minute or two and identify what you might describe as the core values of your company and of you, because it should be singular in a sense, you're the leader as a CEO, but what are the values that cut across your manufacturing operation, your installation operations, your service operation, really across the company? What are the values that bring your team, all the people that work for your company, together?
We treat people with respect. And, our safety guy has a saying in here that basically make the guy next to you better. And that, I think, permeates throughout the operation. Everybody is trying to treat each other respectfully and make the other guy better. And you do that with hard work and dedication and pride in your craft. And I think that's the culture that we have here, and that is a focus on any individual, whether that's in the accounting department or in the engineering department or in the factory or in the installation. Everybody tries to make the guy next to them better so that we all have a better work experience. That's what we're about.
Yeah. So if I were to ask a random sample of folks that work for your company, what do you think is the most important value that this company operates with every day? You think I'd get a fair number of answers that said we respect each other?
I think you would get the vast majority. 99% would say that. I'd be surprised if everybody didn't say that. That's who we are. That's what we're about.
Yeah. So that means automatically that means that there is another value that relates very closely to this, and that is obviously what you say and what you do all demonstrates the importance of that value. So integrity is something which is fundamental to your company as well.
Absolutely, it's essential. I think it's essential to life. That's how I live my life, and I try to lead by example and do the right thing and treat people with respect, and that's what we're about.
Yeah. Let's broaden a little bit to the industry. We can just take the finishing trades or take the glazing trade itself. What would you say is the biggest opportunity or challenge, depending on which way we want to look at it, for the glazing trade right now as we look at where we are currently and we look at the future in the next 5 or so years, maybe up to even 10 years. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities that are on your mind as the leader of this organization that you're going to be confronting or have already begun to confront and have to find a way to lead through and get to the other side?
Well, we're out in California, so to us, it's assimilating different cultures, and I would say in our operation, we probably have, as a native language, 10 to 15 different languages spoken, in our operation. People came from many different countries and many different places. So assimilating them into, a cohesive group and with a similar mindset is important. And getting there is a process, and choosing people and finding people who want to do that and want to be part of a team environment is really a challenge, I find, just again because of language barriers that we face. It's difficult when you speak different languages, and as a second language, little idioms and things can mean something different to someone else, and actions. So getting people to understand that we're working together as a team, and that if they want to be part of that, there's great opportunity for growth in this industry. I think skilled labor is one of the most honest, frankly, undervalued things out there in society as general. I don't think really people have fully appreciated what it takes to become a journeyman glazer, for example. And that the process with an apprenticeship and the path to get there is a long road. So that's one component of our operation, but it's working as a cohesive group and getting everybody to come together. So that's part of the challenge.
I would think your positive view about what it represents as a challenge, that there is a tone in your organization that suggests that among other things, starting with that mutual respect, that extends in a very operational way, means that we don't all speak the same language. We don't all speak a language well. We will have difficulties communicating and understanding each other, and so we also then value as something important to our company this notion of, if you respect others, then you demonstrate patience. You demonstrate a willingness to take a little more time to make sure that there's mutual understanding, rather than simply moving off quickly and realizing that I don't think what he said is what he meant, and doing all those kinds of things that end up causing some level of anxiety, maybe at points in time when deadlines are at hand, when a critical shipment of a drywall assembly is about ready to leave your factory, and there's tension, that things can get a little dicey. what's your experience with your company, and are these the kinds of things that are actively in the minds, not of you, because I know they are, just in an absolute clear sense. You have a vision for what your company needs to do to be successful internally with each other, as well as serving your customers. Do your supporting leaders, your direct reports, your managers, your supervisors, are they consistently on the page that you know they need to be on? And if they're not, how do you get them back to the page?
Yeah, I think that's critical. That's where I was going. It comes to your leaders, right? They kind of set the culture. So I find, I personally try to engage with, everybody in the operation. I know most everybody's name all over in our operation. I try to, and I attempt to engage with everybody, but certainly with the leaders, to make sure that we have conversations about how we're treating people and how we're growing people and how we're interacting and how we're collaborating in stressful environment, because construction's a very stressful environment. There's deadlines and liquidated damages, and things can get tough and ugly. And it's if we're doing our job as managers and planning our process properly, then we allow for everybody to be successful and to have a less stressful environment. And I think that is essential for those leaders to understand that culture and plan accordingly. So again, rising everybody up so that everybody understands the goal and has a chance to participate and help the team succeed and meet those goals.
Mm-hmm. Do you think and again, you're running a very successful company by all accounts. Do you think on a day-to-day basis that the folks that you look at as being leaders in your organization, that have job titles that may include foreman, operations manager, director, whatever the titles may be, that talk about their functional role in the company, do you think that they, in an active, moment-to-moment, day-by-day sense, understand that they are also leadership in your organization, which means that each and every day they have work to be done, they have orders to be filled, they have shipments to be made, they have installations to be set up, all that work of doing the business of your company. But at the same time, they have to keep in mind the nature of their relationship with the people that work for them, and that they have a responsibility to have in their minds. And not only do I have to direct them and manage an operation, but I also have to motivate them. I also have to, at times, inspire them to meet a deadline when we know it is virtually impossible for us to get this particular unit and this order completed by this date, but we must. And that they go about interacting with their people that are doing hands-on in the field or in the shop, and they're successful in getting that work done. Do they understand what being a leader means in terms of their day-to-day?
I believe they do, and certainly on our team, we talk about that often. And leadership, you lead by example. As we mentioned previously, it's like if the time you got to put in the time, you put in the time. I wouldn't expect anybody in the operation in any capacity who's leading to think that someone's going to work overtime and double time and they're not doing the same thing. If that's what's required, that's what you do to set an example and lead. And that's part of it is putting in that extra effort when it's necessary. And that's not all the time. We find that's the exception. If you plan properly, that you don't need to do that. But of course, when it's time, then that's what's expected of a leader. And I think I can only speak for our operation, but we talk about it often and we focus on that and leading by example.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I know that you have, I don't know in specific terms how much, let's call it, that you study about leadership, but I guess you probably are much better informed than a lot of people in the same position as you have. I get a sense of that just from our limited interactions. And again, in my introduction, again, I think I was fairly accurate when I related the idea that you and I met formally for the first time at FIF. But and again, you'll probably recall, because isn't there recording? It's on my website where Tim Stricker, our good mutual friend, is a man I respect in a very significant way over many others. He's a really good guy. I wasn't necessarily initially that pleased, frankly, with the way he introduced me at FIF. And you may recall that among his words, well, everybody knows Dennis Duran. So I wasn't at the moment when he said it, I wasn't sure if that was just his frustration because he misread the previous sentence, or if he was trying to say something nice. And to this day, he won't admit whether or not he was trying to be nice. So it's important to remember things like first impressions, and then how people see us. And for you as a leader, again, I don't know what the average tenure of your employees is, but my guess is you probably have employees been working for your company for a very long time, some of whom are approaching that point in time where they go and somebody else has to come. And we'll talk about that whole issue in terms of how it's affecting you and the industry. But this whole notion of remembering moment to moment, and it's something that you pass down to the folks that are more close to the folks boots on the ground in the factory and in the field. That is this idea that in my leadership role, I had to remember people are always watching me. They're watching what I do. They're listening to what I say. And if everything is reconciles moment to moment, phrase to phrase, action to action, things are good. If they don't, that's when we start to plant the seed of trust not being present in these relationships, and then all bets are off in terms of what things can happen. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, one of those old adages, actions speak louder than words. I was always taught that as a kid. That's my dad was always drilling that in us. You can talk, but you got to walk. So walk the walk. That's how I was brought up and how I was raised. And I believe in that. It's like your actions speak loudly, and let them do the right thing, and people will see that. And again, put in the work and show them that you're willing to do, what you're asking other people to do. That's essential. So, our operation, I think it's really exciting for me. One of the things that I love, and you mentioned, people are starting to retire, but what we see in our business, since we've started this, many people have been with me, the whole time, 20 something years. And I take great pride in that. And something else I take a lot of pride in is that we have second generations, in our operation. So we have, there's one perfect example I can give. There's a gentleman who is out in our manufacturing, who runs part of the, punching, milling sections of the factory out there. Great guy. And his son actually interned with us through college and got his mechanical engineering degree, and now works in our engineering department. And this gentleman's daughter during college worked as a secretary, in our operation, answering the phone, and as an assistant. So when I see things like that, and we have many of those, in particular, this tends to be, for the most part, it's construction is a male industry, right? So most of these, we're seeing more and more young women come into the operation, but we don't have many older women who are in our operation or in the trades. We're seeing their sons coming into the operation. And that is, I get a big thrill out of that, because I feel like they're entrusting me with their kid, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that this operation is successful, so that their kids and their families can have a great life, just like their fathers and their, ahead of them. So I take a lot of pride in that, and that's something that I'm very proud of.
As you should be. Let's talk about the state of our industry in a couple of different ways for a few moments. First, let's talk about this whole, and again, these are things that are every day. I read another article, I have another conversation. I'm sure you find yourself doing the same thing. One of the areas that we're talking about a lot, and have been for, I would say actively for, I'm not going to give our industry credit for much more than the last 3 or 4 years that we've been talking about things that fall under the category of wellness. And I'm speaking specifically about mental health, about addiction, about suicide, the opioid crisis, and all those things. How are we doing as an industry now to be able to affect all of those horrible realities that exist in our industry? How are we doing?
Well, I think it's important to put it in perspective too, because, when I, as a kid, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, we did, I've been around
I want to pause on that. Was it 40 or 50? I mean, that's Yeah. Go ahead.
I was pushing a broom when I was 7 or 8, so it
There you go.
it could be 50. So,
right.
so
let's get back to our serious conversation.
Yeah,
I apologize. I couldn't help myself, Chris.
No problem. But yeah, with regard to mental issues and drugs and these things, I don't know that they were as it was different in the olden days. And I think now you mentioned these last 3-4 years, I think we're certainly aware of this and we're focusing on that. And I see dramatic improvement. You got to be aware before you can improve. So we've become a lot more aware of this, and I see us improving, as we need to. There's certainly a long way to go, because I just think the world is different with the internet and with all of the different pressures that we have. It's a different world than it was 40, 50 years ago that I was mentioning. It is important to have these discussions and have opportunity to help people who need help, because people, working people are the best people. Anybody that's, people that are working and they have some issues going on, anything you can do to help them, to honestly to love them,
Mm-hmm.
and allow them to get better, that's something we need to take seriously and we need to engage in. That is, and the awareness is there. It's exponentially better than it's ever been. And if we make the same strides that we've made in this last 5 years, in the next 5 years, I think we'll be in a very good place. So, having this discussion, talking about it's important.
Good. I think your optimism is important as a leader. So I think that's terrific. The other thing we're talking about for a number of years, but again, also not long. Again, one of the things about our industry, which we both know, we've both been in this industry for a long time, is that change is glacially slow. Although actually now that the Earth is heating up, the glaciers are starting to melt faster. But the point is still there. We don't change rapidly. We don't change how we do things. We don't change and incorporate new techniques, new technologies rapidly. We do it at the construction industry pace. So as it relates to the generations that are represented in our workforce, the millennials, are in the senior leadership roles in a lot of organizations. Some of them are now owners of their own companies. So they're sitting in the seat like the seat you're sitting in. The boomers are still sitting in seats, but they're figuring out who's going to get their chair after they leave. Whatever role they play. And we have the other younger generations, including now, I think that the newest generation, I think, is called the Alpha generation, is my recollection. And those are the ones that are just starting like summer part-time jobs kind of thing. How's the shifting demographics and just in generations? You touched on the women thing. We'll come back to that for a second, in a little bit. But just the generational transitions and migrations. How are you feeling that in your business, if you are right now?
No doubt. This is part of what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation. There's different cultures for different age groups, and trying to get them to sync is essential to have an efficient operation and for things to work smoothly. So we're very cognizant of it. We have this conversation a lot, and the work from home thing, and from the engineers might be different than from the guys in the factory, because of course they're there. So having syncing these different philosophies and thoughts and age groups is definitely a challenge, and you need to be aware of it. And it's, I believe, I'm a big believer in communicating and being together. And we're certainly doing this face to face. I think this helps a lot, having this ability to look at somebody in the eye and have conversations and be in the same room. I'm a big believer in it. So I think the more you do that, the more you find commonalities and can get to the ultimate goal, which is getting things, getting projects done and getting projects built on time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you talked about the industry has been slow, but we try to move a little quickly. We try to we're always looking for technology and things to improve ourselves and our operation, and certainly the younger demographics are a lot more cognizant of the tools that are required to do that. So we're always bringing them to the table where they may not be leaders, but they understand things that the leaders may not understand, and getting them at the table to give guidance is essential. And I think that empowers them, which again helps bring the groups together.
Yeah.
So that's what we do.
Yeah, and as you well understand, in part what you described in talking about a younger generation bringing their almost natural inclinations to utilize technology-based tools in performing their work, even at the most basic time management, records management, et cetera, level, that they also then position themselves to be able to fill a role which is understood, but also, again, just in the last few years, I think more actively being implemented at the contractors level, and that is this notion of mentoring people. Because with their technology savvy, you and I have our smartphones, and that's the good news. The bad news is the phone is much smarter than we are. But the younger generations, to them, they can use more than one finger, and they move very quickly through it, and they can get a beneficial use accomplished with it very well. So they become potentially have the opportunity to mentor someone that's like the CEO of the company or the head of operations or what have you. And so I think that what you describe is without putting that label on it, and not a perfunctory label, it's an important one, but without putting that on there, it sounds like that's kind of part of your culture.
Indeed. That's putting your ego in check too, right? Because I'm okay to ask a young guy, hey, how do I do this function, or how, walk me through this, because I'm old and I'm kind of a Luddite. So can you walk me through the process? And that, I think, that goes back to, again, a culture of humility too. That's if you don't know something, then ask and be willing to learn. That is, I think that's part of life, right? That's part of the fun.
Yeah, and what you're touching on there in those thoughts is the role that understanding yourself and how important that is. I talk about self-awareness. I deliver. In fact, in the last 3 weeks, I've been at 2 different locations at a major general contractor. Most recently in Louisville at the Ford battery plant project, a huge mega project. And the general contractor asked me to come in and deliver a workshop, a soft skills workshop. As you know, I'm the soft skills guy. We haven't talked about the book yet. We should probably spend the last 3 minutes just talking about the book. But we're not going to do that. We're certainly not going to do that. But my workshop focused and utilized.
What's the name of the book?
That was not necessary. That was Tim Stricker will listen to this interview and he'll be so pleased to hear you say that, because we're not editing that out. Leave it in. I want people to know what Chris Bagatelis just said to me. But the workshop utilized an assessment instrument, and I work with a couple of them pretty heavily. In fact, we use one in the project management program that I've delivered for the last 10 years for LMCI, and that is it's something called a DISC behavioral assessment. And so I had 60 of their superintendents and foremen in the room. They completed this assessment online prior to the workshop, and we processed that workshop to help them understand something about differences between them based on their personality, as described in this assessment. But more importantly, we also talked about emotional intelligence and what their comfortable mindsets are, the way they handle situations, because that's what it's all about. If you're particularly if in a lead role, a managing role, you're handling situations all the time, every day. And it was quite an aha moment for a number of them. But the whole idea is that, and Richard Branson, CEO of Virgin Airways, among other things, it was an article about some of his beliefs in Inc. just yesterday. And the theme of the article basically was that EQ, emotional intelligence, significantly outweighs the importance of IQ. And research supports that, A lot of people's experience support that. You kind of alluded to it in a proper way, a correct way, an excellent way, actually, a good instructive way, when you talked about the notion of humility, but also the leader, a great leader, knows and believes that they don't have to know everything. They don't have to have the answer. They don't have to set the tone moment to moment. Other people can be the smartest people in a room. And that all is rooted in the idea of how you view yourself in your role as a leader. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a simple person. And I realize in our operation that I can't do a third of the things that are happening around here. And I understand that. And I understand that everybody has, we're all have our God-given gifts, right? And it's great to see people take whatever that gift is and roll with it and excel with that gift. And that's important to do in a collaborative way because it just builds a great environment for a work environment. That's what we're talking about, a work environment here. So to me, understanding and realize, I understand that. And it's an important, I believe, humility, like we mentioned, for a leader is important. Understand what you don't know and empower people who have those skills and let them roll with it and give them responsibilities. That's an exciting thing in our industry. And again, to the young people too, bringing them up, give them responsibility for some of those technical tasks. They might not have the wisdom of how things are erected in the most efficient way to do it and how things come together, but they know how to, shoot the lasers and do the trembles and jump on the layouts, exponentially quicker than an older guy. So let's empower them to do that, right? Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah. What you're describing there in just a terrific way is really in a very full sense, why inclusion is so important as an aspect of the culture of organizations, because there are a lot of different people, a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different everything, and to include all the possibilities in terms of people's backgrounds, their abilities, et cetera, can produce a dynamic environment that could then become a great business. And you, I would say, based on some of the things that I've learned about you, some of the things you've said, I think that your company is an excellent example where things like inclusion, like love, you used the word love, and you may recall the question I put to the entire panel. And I do have to say, as I recalled, that you were very comfortable answering that question. At least it seemed that way to me.
Yeah.
Not necessarily all of our panel members were, although their answers were all excellent. I look back on that 90-minute session, and I think there were many great ideas, thoughts, and feelings shared by that group of folks up on the stage with that audience. And you were an important part of that. Guess what? We're done. We're done.
Well, all good things must end.
Well, that's right. Or end for now with an invitation to return, maybe after the next FIF, and come back and talk again, or maybe even sooner.
I'd love to do it.
I really appreciate your time. And again, we know each other much better now than we did before I called you to have a prep call about FIF. Again, although you can correct me if you want, I'm sure we've been at events together.
Of course. Yeah.
But I don't recall us ever having a conversation. I do know that I was in an appropriate framework in trustee meetings, talked about, and you were part of those conversations. But it was great to first connect with you for that phone call, to have you in that discussion, and now to be able to spend this time with you, hearing more of your wisdom and your thoughts and perspectives on leadership, on people, etc. Thanks very much for coming.
I appreciate what you're doing, and growing this relationship has been fun, and we'll keep talking.
Good. Take care, my friend.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today for this episode of the Soft as Steel podcast with your host, Dennis Duran. Dennis is the author of Soft as Steel and a leading speaker and trainer for organizations across many industries and verticals. To learn more about the work Dennis is doing to activate soft skills in the workplace, contact him at dennisduranspeaking.com. Be sure to check out his book, Soft as Steel, on Amazon or wherever books are sold. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or wherever you'd like to get your podcasts. And please remember to share this episode with your friends, colleagues, and anyone you feel would benefit from the conversation. We'll see you next time on the Soft as Steel podcast with Dennis Duran.
Produced by Audavita Studios. Connect your voice to the world.